The moment you say, "I don't like having visitors," people immediately assume something is wrong with you. They call you antisocial, cold, strange, defensive. But Carl Jung saw something deeper hiding beneath that behavior. He believed that the people who protect their personal space are often protecting something far more valuable than comfort. They are protecting their soul. Because not everyone experiences human interactions the same way. Some people gain energy from noise. Others lose pieces of themselves in it. And if you've ever felt exhausted after someone entered your space, if you've ever felt relief the second the door closed behind a guest, Jung would say that reaction is not accidental. It reveals the structure of your inner world. See, the home is never just a building. Psychologically, the home represents the self. Your room, your silence, your routines, these are extensions of your identity. So when unexpected people enter your environment, it can feel like they are entering your mind. That's why certain individuals become deeply uncomfortable with visitors. Not because they hate people, but because they instinctively guard their inner peace. Carl Jung believed introverted personalities process life internally first. They reflect before they speak. They observe before they trust. Their energy moves inward, not outward. And in a loud world that constantly demands attention, performance, and availability, these people slowly become exhausted, so they withdraw not to escape humanity, but to recover from it. And the dangerous part is this. Society often punishes people for needing solitude. If you enjoy being alone, people think you're unhappy. If you protect your privacy, they think you're hiding something. If you don't constantly socialize, they assume you lack confidence. But Jung warned that the individual who never spends time alone eventually loses connection with themselves, because silence reveals things noise cannot. When you sit alone long enough, you begin hearing your real thoughts instead of society's programming. You begin noticing which relationships drain you. You recognize how much of your personality was built to please others. Solitude becomes a mirror, and many people avoid that mirror their entire lives. That's why some souls become protective of their space. Visitors bring expectations, energy, judgment, conversation, performance. And for emotionally deep people, that can feel incredibly invasive. They don't want conflict. They don't want chaos. They simply want peace. And peace has become rare. Jung believed the deeper a person becomes psychologically, the more selective they become socially. Not out of arrogance, but out of survival. They stop allowing everyone access to their emotional world. They realize not every presence is healthy. Not every conversation is nourishing. Not every visitor leaves gently. Some people enter your home and leave stress behind. Others leave confusion. Others leave emotional heaviness you can't explain. Sensitive people feel this immediately. That's why they begin loving closed doors, quiet nights, and limited company. And maybe the truth is, your soul was never designed for constant access. Maybe your discomfort with visitors is not weakness. Maybe it's awareness. Maybe your spirit understands something your mind is still trying to explain. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." And sometimes awakening begins the moment you stop apologizing for protecting your peace. So if you enjoy solitude, if your energy returns in silence, if your home feels sacred to you, don't be ashamed of that. Some souls heal in crowds. But others heal when the world finally leaves them alone. There's a strange moment that happens when someone says they don't like visitors. The room changes. People become suspicious. They laugh awkwardly. They start creating explanations. Maybe they're depressed. Maybe they're rude. Maybe they just don't like people. But Carl Jung believed that human behavior always hides a deeper psychological truth. And according to Jung, the need for privacy is often connected to something far more profound than simple preference. It is connected to the protection of the inner self. Because some people are not built for constant access. They feel everything too deeply. Every conversation affects them. Every interruption shifts their emotional balance. Every unexpected knock on the door pulls them away from the fragile peace they fought hard to create. And most people never understand this. The modern world worships availability. You're expected to answer instantly, socialize constantly, open your doors endlessly. The louder you are, the more accepted you become. But Jung warned that a person who spends too much time adapting to the outside world eventually becomes disconnected from their true identity. That's why certain people become extremely protective of their space. Their home is not just a house. It becomes a psychological sanctuary, a safe place where they can finally remove the mask society forced them to wear all day. Out there they perform, inside they breathe. And when visitors arrive unexpectedly, that peace disappears. Suddenly the atmosphere changes. The emotional pressure returns. The need to entertain, respond, smile, explain, and adjust comes rushing back. For some personalities, especially deeply introspective ones, this is mentally exhausting. Jung believed introverted souls recharge through solitude because their energy naturally flows inward. They process emotions internally. They analyze life deeply. They often carry rich inner worlds filled with reflection, imagination, memory, and meaning. Silence is not empty to them. Silence is alive. That's why they crave it. Not because they hate humanity, but because the outside world becomes overwhelming after too much exposure. And here's the part society rarely admits. People who constantly need noise are often running from themselves. Many individuals fill every quiet moment with distraction because silence forces them to confront uncomfortable truths. Their fears, their loneliness, their unresolved emotions. But the person who sits comfortably alone has usually faced those shadows already. Jung called this process confronting the shadow self, the hidden part of the personality most people avoid. And solitude becomes the doorway to that confrontation. When no visitors are present, when no distractions remain, you finally meet yourself honestly. That experience changes people. It makes them more selective, more observant, more careful about who enters their emotional space because they realize energy is contagious. Some people walk into your home carrying stress, negativity, envy, chaos, or emotional instability. Sensitive souls absorb these atmospheres immediately. Even after the visitor leaves, the emotional weight stays behind. So eventually, the quiet person stops explaining themselves. They stop apologizing for needing distance. They stop forcing social energy they don't truly feel. And maybe that's not antisocial at all. Maybe it's wisdom. Carl Jung understood that not every soul is meant to live loudly. Some souls are designed for depth instead of attention, reflection instead of performance, peace instead of constant stimulation. So if you feel calmest when the door is closed, if silence restores your spirit, if too much social interaction leaves you emotionally drained, there may be nothing wrong with you at all. You may simply be protecting the only thing this world constantly tries to invade, your inner peace. Most people are terrified of being alone. That's why they keep the television running. That's why they constantly check their phones. That's why silence makes them uncomfortable. Because the moment the noise disappears, they are forced to meet themselves. Carl Jung understood this better than most psychologists ever did. He believed that every human being carries a hidden inner world, a private universe filled with fears, desires, memories, wounds, and truths that rarely get shown to society. And the people who dislike having visitors are often the same people who spend more time inside that inner world than outside of it. They are not empty people. They are overcrowded internally. Their mind is constantly active, reflecting, analyzing, observing, feeling. Even when they say nothing, their thoughts never truly stop. That's why solitude becomes necessary for them. It's not a luxury, it's emotional survival. Because every visitor changes the atmosphere. Some people walk into your home and bring noise with them. Expectations, questions, judgment, emotional pressure. And while others barely notice this shift, deeply introspective people feel it immediately. Their nervous system reacts, their energy changes, their peace disappears. Carl Jung believed introverts naturally protect their psychological energy because they process stimulation more intensely than extroverted personalities. Small interactions affect them deeply. Crowded environments exhaust them faster. Too much social exposure leaves them mentally overloaded. So eventually they begin loving isolation. Not because they hate people, but because they finally discovered how peaceful life feels without constant interruption. And society misunderstands this completely. The world treats solitude like a problem that needs fixing. If someone enjoys being alone, people immediately assume sadness. But Jung believed solitude was one of the most important parts of psychological growth. Because when you are finally alone, the performance ends. No pretending, no social masks, no forced conversations, just you. And that's where transformation begins. Jung warned that many people spend their entire lives becoming the version of themselves others expect. They become addicted to approval, addicted to fitting in, addicted to social validation. But the quiet soul often escapes this trap because they spend enough time alone to recognize who they truly are beneath society's expectations. That self-awareness changes everything. It makes them more selective with relationships, more careful with trust, more protective of their environment, because they understand something most people ignore. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Some visitors only come to consume your energy. Some arrive carrying emotional chaos. Others invade your peace without even realizing it. Sensitive people absorb these emotional atmospheres deeply. One exhausting interaction can affect them for hours, sometimes days. That's why they begin creating boundaries others don't understand. Closed doors, delayed replies, private routines distanced from unnecessary social gatherings. And while the world labels this behavior antisocial, Jung would likely call it individuation. The process of becoming psychologically whole by separating yourself from collective pressure, because the strongest identity is built in solitude. That's where clarity is born. That's where intuition sharpens. That's where the soul finally speaks without interruption. And maybe that's why some people secretly fear silence. Because silence exposes truth. It reveals the relationships draining you. It reveals the personality you perform around others. It reveals the emotional exhaustion you've normalized for years. But the person who embraces solitude begins seeing life differently. They stop chasing attention. They stop needing constant company. They stop opening their door to everyone. Not from bitterness, from understanding. So if you dislike having visitors, if too much social interaction drains your spirit, if your peace feels sacred to you, Carl Jung would probably say this is not weakness. It is the sign of a soul becoming aware of itself. The world has always feared quiet people, not because quiet people are weak, but because they are difficult to control. Carl Jung understood this deeply. He believed that people who spend too much time seeking approval from society slowly lose connection with their authentic self. And the moment someone begins protecting their solitude, protecting their peace, and limiting access to their inner world, society becomes uncomfortable because independence threatens people, especially emotional independence. That's why when someone says, "I don't like having visitors," others immediately react with suspicion. They take it personally. They assume rejection. They think something must be wrong with you. But what if your soul simply became tired of constant intrusion? What if your silence is not loneliness, but intelligence? Jung believed modern society pushes people toward endless stimulation, constant social interaction, endless conversations, noise without meaning. But some individuals are psychologically built differently. Their spirit weakens in chaos and strengthens in solitude. These people often become observers instead of performers. They notice energy shifts. They study behavior quietly. They sense emotional tension others ignore. And because they experience the world so deeply, they become extremely selective about who enters their private space. Not everyone understands the value of peace until they lose it. C. Emotionally sensitive people don't just hear words. They absorb atmospheres. A single visitor can change the emotional temperature of an entire home. Some people arrive carrying stress, negativity, jealousy, drama, or emotional instability. And while others brush this off easily, introspective souls feel every bit of it. That's why solitude becomes addictive. For the first time in their lives, they feel emotionally safe. No pressure to entertain, no need to explain themselves, no forced smiles, no emotional performance, just silence, and silence heals them. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming your true self requires distance from noise. It requires moments alone, long enough to hear your own thoughts, instead of society's expectations. Most people never reach this point. They stay surrounded by distractions their entire lives. They fear being alone because solitude forces self-confrontation. In silence, your unresolved wounds appear. Your hidden fears surface. Your real identity begins speaking. And many people run from that experience, but the quiet soul stays. That's why they change over time. They stop craving attention. They stop needing validation. They stop opening their doors to everyone simply to avoid seeming rude, because maturity teaches a painful lesson. Access to you is a privilege, not a right. And the more emotionally aware someone becomes, the smaller their circle often gets, not from arrogance, from clarity. Jung believed psychological growth naturally separates people from environments and relationships that drain their spirit. The awakened person becomes protective of their energy because they finally understand how precious peace truly is. And maybe that's the hidden truth behind people who dislike visitors. Maybe they spent years overwhelmed by other people's expectations. Maybe they spent years emotionally exhausted from constantly giving access to everyone. Maybe solitude became the only place where their nervous system could finally rest. So now they choose quiet evenings, closed doors, private lives, and meaningful connection over constant company. The world may misunderstand them, but deep souls were never designed to be understood by everyone. They were designed to understand themselves. Don't forget to like and subscribe my YouTube channel.